One of my favorite things about running is race day. The cheering crowds, the loud music, and being surrounded by massive groups of runners who share my excitement. And there's a good chance if you don't live in Boston, New York, or Chicago, that there's travel involved too. And experiencing new places through running is an amazing experience. These trips can be really expensive though. Everything from registration to flight and hotels, depending where you go, can really add up. That's why we're giving our 10 best tips to save money on your next big out-of-town race. While giving these tips, I totally get that these trips come at a significant cost, and that all the budgeting in the world won't make it affordable for everyone. There's nothing wrong with sticking to your local 5K, and honestly, some of these races, staying near home, have been some of my favorites. Having said that, I think there's something really special about going to a new city to race, and if you stick around, we'll help you figure out how to be a part of that excitement for a little less cost. Coach Haley, I'm so excited to have you here with me to chat about traveling for races, because this is one of my favorite things ever.
Yay! I'm excited to be back.
Yeah, can you remember what the last race was that you traveled for? I seem to recall there was an ultra was it in France?
Yeah. Oh my God, there was that ultra, and then there was all the cost of getting to it and doing it, and then I ended up dropping out anyways. So that's what's fun, isn't it? These races, they're such an investment, and then if you end up dropping out for any reason, it's a bit like, oh, well, why did I do all that then? Especially when you drop out 20 miles of a 70-mile race and you're like, well, that's like, that's a lot of money I'm not getting back. But still get the experience.
Yeah, I don't know about you though, but the one experience I've had with that is when I went to the Amsterdam Marathon and dropped out. And it almost made it better, like instead of kind of sulking, it was nice to be in a new country and kind of feel like I had a vacation ahead of me.
That's funny, I've also dropped out of the Amsterdam Marathon.
Have you? Something in the water there, I guess.
Yeah, maybe it's not a good one to do. It's a good experience, but I guess that's another one where it was a bit like it's not cheap to get to, and it's not really a cheap place. And then if you drop out, you're like, oh well. But yeah, there's like fun stuff to do, and you can still make a good experience of it. So it's not all bad.
Yeah. Did you have that in France when you went? Were you able to kind of make a runcation out of it?
I mean, not really, just because I was like injured from the ankle twist and I couldn't really walk. So that otherwise it would have been nice to maybe like explore the area a bit, but we kind of planned to go home quite soon after anyway. And I was like, very, very slow at walking due to the twisted ankle. So, and I was in a really bad mood about it. So it wasn't great, but, I did like the area, and I'm hoping to go back to do that race again next year. So, this year actually. So it can't be all bad.
Yeah, what time of year is that?
May.
May. Okay, that's not that far away for an ultra, so I guess you've started training.
Yeah, I guess because I'm aiming to do an ultra at the end of January, so like I've already been training for that. So I'll hope that I'm kind of starting from a good place anyways, and the race at the end of January will just be like a kind of long run for it anyways. So hopefully, but I've been a bit unlucky with races I've entered recently, so I'm kind of not trying to hold on to them too tightly and think, oh, I've got to do that. So, but they are such an investment, it makes you a bit frustrated when you then end up not being able to do it or complete it.
Yeah, so we're recording this in mid-January, but by the time this comes out on January 29th, will you have raced already?
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. I've had some like last minute kind of issues. So I hope that I can do it, but this was more like just a experience because it's like a dream course for me, but not really one that I'm particularly good at. It's very technical. Like literally when I did the recce, we were like doing 15-minute miles, and we weren't exactly taking it easy. It kind of tells you what kind of terrain it's on. It's like climbing over boulders and stuff. So that's definitely not my area. Like I am poor at those races. I'll probably have like old men bombing past me down hills and stuff. But it was kind of like it's such a fantastic course that it was kind of like an experience one. So it's not like I have to be in great shape for it, but it's snowed a lot here recently, and I ran in the snow a bit just to help me prepare for those extreme conditions, but it has like aggravated some stuff for me. So now I'm like, given that May is more my focus, does it make sense to like injure myself here, but I would love to do it. So fingers crossed.
Yeah. All right. So let's bring it back to our topic, all about, trying to make these fantastic races abroad a little bit more affordable. So, what is this dream race? And if you are traveling for it, what are some of those biggest expenses that you expect?
Yeah, I mean, the race is called the Arc of Attrition, and it's a 50 miler. There is a 100-mile version, but I'm not that crazy, so that's like that's something that's going to take like days for most people because it's such tough terrain. But the 50 mile sounded more achievable for me, and it's on the southwest coast path of England, which is known for being quite kind of technical and rocky and stuff. So because it is in England, it's not going to be a massive travel for me, although it is still a 7 hour drive, which of course does come with some costs in terms of fuel and just general kind of wear and tear on the car and stuff. But it's not going to be crazy in terms of travel just because you know we can drive ourselves there. But and then we've managed to, because of the time of year it is, and it's usually like a seaside summery kind of place for people, the accommodation there isn't too bad either. So we've managed to find somewhere, I think, fairly cheap to stay. So it's not been a major break the bank one, but then also I think we are quite good at like saving money when going to these big races. That being said, I think a lot of the cost just comes from the fact that these ultras cost like a stupid amount of money to enter anyway. Entering the race itself was probably the biggest cost, and then getting all the mandatory gear, which is insane. Like, I feel like you've got to have like, you know, plates and bowls and a whole set of cutlery and 50 layers, and you know, the mandatory gear list is just a bit silly, I think. And that costs money, and I don't like that part of ultras because I think that makes it a bit exclusive to the people who can't afford it. And then even if you can afford all these bits of gear, it's like you might pay £30 for something, but if you pay £120, the thing is like 100 times lighter or something, you know. And then it's like being able to pay for the gear makes you better, which I don't really like. But hey, I guess it's just how things are in this new kind of racing that I'm doing, so I have to get used to it.
Yeah, and that's very much the case for marathons too. Like, you don't necessarily need that 300 pair of super shoes, but you know, they might make you a little bit faster. And honestly, even if you're not wearing super shoes, I feel like even regular daily trainers are a lot more expensive than they used to be 5 or 10 years ago.
They are so expensive these days. I just cannot believe it. Like, I still refuse to pay more like £100 for a pair of trainers. Like, I try to refuse, but it just becomes harder and harder. It's just crazy.
Yeah, so I think we've covered kind of the fuel cost, transportation, flight if you have to take that. Talked about some of the accommodations, the actual entry fee. Um, I think, though, one of the big expenses is just when you're actually there, and that's maybe the one you don't account for as much. Because I find I know what my flight and hotel are going to be when I go to a race, but you don't necessarily think as much about what are you going to pay at the expo? What are you going to pay for restaurants? What souvenirs are you going to buy? Because that's kind of stuff that I think are a little bit more impulse purchases.
Yeah, definitely. Like, they can add up, but those costs are probably also one of the most controllable. I know that it's not something that I generally spend a lot on, but it also depends a bit on like how you want to see things, and if you have wanted to do a race for ages, and you know you want to make a massive experience of it because it is so important to you, I think then some expense in terms of what you do when you're there is justifiable, if you can afford that and you want to afford that. But I think there is a way to make that part of things a lot cheaper if that is what you want.
Yeah, oh, 100%. And I think my personal opinion is, you know, if you find that Boston jacket that you've been working for years, if not even longer than that, then totally worth it if it's going to make your day. But
Yeah,
there's
I
so many
agree.
little purchases you can get that you can probably get for cheaper back home.
Yes, definitely.
Cool. Well, maybe that's a good kicking off point to get into what are our 10 top tips for saving on travel races. What do you say we get into it?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, so I'm going to start with number one, which I think is perfect timing as we're releasing this in January for anyone doing a spring race, because that's register early. So maybe let's talk about how this can save you some money.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely can. I mean, in terms of entering the race itself, a lot of races, I know ones that I've done before have like tiers of entry, you know. So, like, if you're entering a year before, you might pay less money than if you enter like last minute, and that's definitely worth looking into. It's sometimes like a sliding scale, so like, you know, 1 year before is this, 6 months before is this. Not all races are like that, you know. Some races, they just, this is how much it costs and that's that, but that's worth looking into. I mean, a lot of these things are going to differ by the race, and for different races there are different ways to save money, but that's definitely somewhere that you can save in terms of the race entry itself. And then, you know, if you enter in advance, then you can book your flights and hotels in advance, and that's where you really can save quite a lot of money.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the last race I did in Spain, the round trip price I paid was probably like half what it would have been a month out from the race, but that's because 10, 11 months out in advance, I had registered, had everything booked, and granted, this was for Valencia, which actually does fill up 10 or 11 months in advance, but even if the races don't fill up, it can actually be a lot more affordable if you're able to plan that far ahead. I know that that's maybe not a circumstance everyone is in, but if you are able to know what your schedule is going to be.
Yeah, definitely. Like, everything is so, well, in most cases, it's a lot more affordable to do it like that. Hotels, I mean, I haven't flown to a massive amount of races. I tend to drive. I like to drive to places, and I don't really like to fly that much, although I have in the past. I've done some pretty long drives to get to races just because I prefer it that way. But in terms of hotels, I know that when I used to do the London Marathon most years, I would sort of book the hotel for next year's London Marathon basically straight after I'd left the hotel, the same hotel. You know, for that year's marathon, I'll be booking the next year's already, because it would be a lot cheaper to book it then. And the thing is that you can usually, like, if you book one of the like classic kind of, and just thinking of this, I'm using London as an example here. If you book one of the classic UK kind of budget hotels, they're like nearly always, oh, and you can cancel up to 24 hours before you check in. And then, like, where's the harm in booking it? Even if you're like thinking you're like 50-50 on whether you'll do London next year, you might as well just book it, because you can cancel it. So sometimes I think that in some cases you might not even have to like pay until you actually go or something. So but it's usually, yeah, it's usually cheaper like that, and then you've got it if you want it, and if not, you just cancel it. Or sometimes they've actually just kind of sold it to someone else as well. So it's kind of worth it if you can do that in advance.
Totally, and I think that free cancellation is definitely something to look out for, because I'll say the race I'm looking at in the spring, I'm not exactly sure which day I'll be leaving, so I've literally booked the same hotel for 2 different lengths of time because it's free cancellation, pay there, so then I can just cancel one reservation. So even if you can't book flights because you're looking at the dates, that's maybe something to consider, just so you can lock in that hotel rate.
Yeah, that sounds like a very wise idea.
Wise, as long as you remember to cancel, obviously set
Yes,
those reminders.
yes, definitely. You definitely want to set a reminder. I'm pretty sure that me and my husband have forgotten to cancel one in the past. But yeah, usually it's okay.
Usually, yeah, you got to be on the ball for sure. All right, let's get into number 2 here, which is check your airline fees, because you can end up paying a lot more than just the cost of the flight. What do you think of this one, Haley?
Yeah, definitely. Like, if you end up going on like a budget airline, then they're just going to try and charge you for like 50,000 more things. And like, to be honest, you probably don't need it. Like, I feel like you can usually get well, the races that I've done before, if you're going somewhere for a bit longer, this is obviously going to be a bit different. This is probably relating to like races where I didn't go away for that long, but I found that you can kind of get stuff in your hand luggage, and then you don't really need to shell out for the check luggage. Or maybe like if there's 2 of you, then one of you pays for the check luggage, and then, you know, you're saving a bit of money there. But I think just be wary of adding it on stuff that you don't need, because you can make your flight cost a lot more.
Yeah, and in some airlines, especially the budget ones, will charge you even for carry-ons. And if you're bringing racing gear, you're definitely going to need at the very least a carry-on. Plus, even if you do need to pay for these things, sometimes there's a difference in the rate you pay at the airport versus booking in advance online. So it's something you're going to want to be aware of.
Yeah, definitely. I think this is the one where you'll have loads of tips, Corey, because I as I mentioned, I'm not really like a frequent flyer, so you probably have some great tips there.
I do, yeah. I mean, the other thing I would say is check if you have benefits with your credit card or bank. Obviously, for those who listen, they'll know I'm up in Canada, so I have a card with Air Canada, so anytime I fly with them, I can bring my carry-ons for free. Which, if you're going for a weekend, doesn't matter. But if I know I'm gonna need the carry-on or also the free checked bag that comes with it, then that's anywhere from $50 to $100 saved, depending on what airline you fly with.
Yeah, that sounds like a wise thing to do
Cool.
as well.
All right, let's talk number 3. And Haley, I think this is one that you do have some good opinions on. And it's don't go to the race expo without a shopping list, or don't buy anything at all. What do you feel about this one?
Yeah, it depends how you look at it, because for some people the expo is like part of the experience and it's fun to go and it's fun to buy stuff. My personal choice has always been to like aim to buy nothing at the expo, and I'm not sure I ever really have. I'm always very good to make a checklist kind of before I leave, so I have everything with me, and then even in cases where I felt like I've needed something else, I'd just rather visit like a local shop, or if I'm there a few days before, maybe even like just buy something off of Amazon or something to come like next day, because I think the expo is just not a great place to really do more than just pick up your number. That's my opinion, and I think there's definitely a case for saying, oh, but it's part of the experience and you should enjoy it. And if it's like, your once in a lifetime race, then you definitely should enjoy it. If that's something that like means a lot to you and will help, you have the best experience, then I'm definitely all for it. Personally, I kind of am more about like, it's a place where you can pick up germs. It's a place where you can spend a lot of time on your feet. So I'm kind of like get in, get your number, get out, and where you place you can kind of lose your money, but yeah, like just consider your own personal viewpoint on that and what is important to you about your experience and whether you do want to spend money there and time there. If you don't, like, make a plan to get in and get out. Make a checklist before you leave your race so you don't forget anything, or if you do forget something, see if there's a way you can get it without going to the expo, because sometimes there's like local running stores or something, and that might be a little bit cheaper. Or if it's just like gels, you might even be able to get them in a supermarket or something. So just consider if there's cheaper places to get anything you've forgotten. But if it's part of the experience for you, then I don't see anything wrong with enjoying it. But then maybe you also need to set yourself a little bit of a budget that you aren't going to go over, because you probably could go a bit mad in those places if you let yourself.
Absolutely. And in terms of like gels and chews and stuff, if you forgot, definitely check stores or get them at the expo. But I definitely wouldn't leave them behind just to get them at the expo, because I think, for one, you're probably going to find better deals if you buy them elsewhere. But also, two, I think it just adds time and stress to be looking for something you're going to need on race day. Like, I think it's fun to shop around for jackets or shorts or shoes that are not going to be the ones you race for later. Again, those are going to add up, so definitely make a checklist of what you actually want to buy. But in terms of gels, if you're hunting around and having trouble finding them the day before your race, like it's not going to add to your race expo experience.
No.
Okay. Let's go to number 4, which I guess relates to the point we were kind of just making, but you don't need to buy expensive running gels. So maybe let's elaborate on this one.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's one reason why it is to get stuff ahead of time, because you can often get, less about thinking about exactly which gel you use and more about thinking where you get them from and how you buy them. I buy the same gel every time, SIS beach gels, because they work for me. And I've seen them on Amazon for like wildly varying prices. Like sometimes they're like, £80, and then again like £30 for like the same amount, just how they vary over time. So if you're buying something like that, like keep an eye on the price, because it might sort of change. And if it does kind of go down in price, then if you can, stock up, because you'll regret it when the price goes up again. And sometimes you can save a bit of money by buying in bulk from I think this is going to be different depending on where you live, because if there are different, I know there's places in the US where you can like get kind of credit when you buy stuff and different deals and all that, but it's worth kind of researching the options and seeing how you can get your particular gel more cheaply. And that might be buying a bit more at once, or using somewhere where you get like points when you buy that you can then get more with, or looking for deals, or it's kind of about doing the research, I think, on that. If you want a particular brand, which you might, and I think if you do want a particular brand and you found a brand that works well for you, that is something that it is worth investing in if you can, like probably more so than like getting expensive gear, because a good gel really can like make or break your race. And there are definitely a wide variety of gels out there, and I know I've tried a lot of gels and there are only certain ones that work for me, so and they literally make or break my race. So it's definitely something that I have decided to invest in the past, but that doesn't mean I'm not like looking for the deals and using like multi-buys and discount codes and things. So
yeah, and I would say don't be afraid to try gels multiple times. I think, right now I think the big expensive one is one that everyone talks about, and that can cost an arm and a leg. And if that works, great. It works well for a lot of people, but that cost can add up over a training cycle. Even if you try another gel that's a little bit more affordable and it doesn't work the first time, I'd say try it at least 2 or 3 times before you rule it out, because sometimes your stomach needs to adapt. But the other thing is, I'm a huge advocate for liquid nutrition, because even if you find a discount on SIS or GU or stuff like that, dollar per gram of carbs, it's never going to be as affordable as getting Gatorade or another sports drink, when you consider that a bottle of that is probably the equivalent of taking 3 gels.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And it definitely, I mean, firstly, I agree with your point about like trying different gels. And I think, Morton might be the one that everyone uses, but there's actually loads of really great ones, and that are quite similar, really. Just because they have a different name, they might still work really well for you. So don't be afraid to experiment with them, because there's probably more than one that works for you, and there might be one that's on a sale or something. And that's definitely how I've come to find a gel I like before. I got it because I had really good discount code for it, and then I thought, actually, this works pretty well for me too. So I think you can kind of try new ones, and you might, and yeah, the other thing is, like, in training, you don't necessarily have to use like your perfect gel all the time. I've definitely, saved my favorite gel for race situations, but because I'm doing a lot of ultra training runs, my gel costs can massively add up. Like because I do a lot of long runs generally, I can use like I can have 3 days in a week where I'm taking quite a few gels, and then for my long runs I might be taking like 10 gels. Like, it's crazy the cost, but like that means I don't always use my number one preferred gel in training. Yeah, I might do in races, but then in training I sometimes try like different things that are a bit cheaper, like drinks, like sports drinks that I might not use in a race, because for me it's like not the optimal way to fuel. I think I find it quite hard to keep a track on how much I'm having, and I always have a very, very low end sweat rate, so I can't necessarily get all my carbohydrates from drinks without overhydrating. Which is a consideration for some people. But if you can like use drinks, and it does work with like your personal sweat rate and everything, then it can be a really good option. And if you're using a drink, there's actually some pretty cheap ways to use drinks that, for example, I often make my own sports drink for these races to try and cut down on my gel use. I'm making my own sports drink quite often, from like just some the same ingredients that are in like common sports drinks, but just buying the kind of constituent ingredients off the internet, like in their own packets, and then kind of mixing it together. And then you haven't got all the flavorings and everything as well. So actually that can be quite good for people's stomachs. But homemade options are something you can try, even if you don't necessarily want to use them in a race. And that works particularly well for sports drinks. Sorry, I actually covered quite a lot of different things there, but any questions?
No, I like the homemade sports drink. Do you have a specific recipe that you go to?
Yes, but my husband has actually been making it recently, and it's kind of his specific recipe, so I'm trying to think what he puts in it, and I don't want to say it wrong and then cause people to make it and like get annoyed at us because we made them like a dodgy drink. But so I think like when you look at the most common gels, there's like probably like fructose and maltodextrin, and then like a little bit of electrolyte. So it's just those 3 things as far as I'm aware, in like the proportions that they use in like the most popular sports drinks. I'm not giving that as advice here because I can't completely remember the components, but I'm sure we can like add it to the show notes or something if I kind of look up the recipe, because I think it's one that's like kind of talked about. If you Google it and make your own sports drink and whatever, it's probably like quite available as well. So I don't think my husband's made some completely new invention either. But it's pretty cheap when you buy the sort of sports drink components individually and then mix it up yourself, and it doesn't take that long. And then you've not got like artificial sweetness and stuff, because that was another reason I started baking. Well, my husband started making it for me, is because I don't really tolerate like artificial sweetness well in terms of my GI issues during running. So making my own kind of made sure there wasn't anything like that in there as well. And then you can actually, if you are lucky enough to have had like a sweat salt test or something, you can always add in the electrolytes that's like specific to you. So it's actually really cool. Even if you don't need to save money there, it's actually a really great thing to do anyway, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's funny. I very much relate. I found that none of the really artificial gels sit well with me, so I can actually dig up. I think those who are listening on audio obviously won't be able to see this, but this has been my go-to for a while. Not a sponsor, but Honey Stinger, which is basically just like honey, a little bit of flavoring and salt. And I've also tried ones that do the same type of thing with maple syrup, but I find they just sit so much better than a lot of the really manufactured ones.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that's probably quite similar. Like, I think a lot of people struggle to tolerate like artificial sweetness, especially when their gut is kind of stressed anyway. I think that's probably something that can help a lot of people.
Yeah, I've even heard as a homemade drink, I can't remember who the runner was that had mentioned this, but literally just diluting maple syrup with some water and then adding salt, and then you've kind of got like an electrolyte drink that has everything that you would have in something that you would buy in store.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that sounds like it could work well. I'll have to try some new some new mixes, I think.
Yeah, I've wanted to try at some point the Cam Levins special. For those who don't know, Cam Levins being a Canadian marathoner, but I've mentioned this on the show before. He's been known to fuel with lemonade on his runs, and that sounds delicious in the summertime.
Oh, cool. Yeah, he's kind of taking the ultra runner approach, because it's quite common at aid stations to have like lemonade and Coke. Like, I like to drink a bit of Coke, like flat Coke on an ultra, because that can help settle your stomach, surprisingly, because it's like it's probably got a bit of sweetness in as well, but I think there must be something counteracting it there, because I do find it quite like stomach settling. So maybe the lemonade is kind of similar.
Yeah, could be. Okay. Let's see the next one. Okay, I think this is also one that we've maybe just touched on a little bit, but making sure that if you are going on a trip for a race, you bring lots of food and snacks. So Haley, how can these food costs add up if you're not prepared with snacks?
Yeah, this is really important, and I always try to do this, because food in like airports and like hotels and even in little corner shops or something like near where you're staying, it's just so crazy, and you end up not getting what you want anyway. And I think like some people almost seem to kind of not bring stuff on purpose, because they think, oh, I get stuff at the airport, but like how often can you really get like the optimal thing for you when you're trying to get like the stuff that you really need pre-race anyways? Like, I feel like this is such a effective thing to just bring your own like carb fuel of choice, for because you know when you're fueling for a marathon, you're probably carbo loading a bit, so you probably need more than normal anyways. So if you're going to rely on stuff in airports and train stations and hotels, I think it's just not going to go great, and that stuff is just so expensive. So just bringing like some staple items that you know your stomach handles well, like we bring like these little croissant things, which are really good for carb loading because they're easy to eat. I think we just got that idea when we were racing in France before, and they sell like these packs of croissants in Audi and stuff, and we just started eating down the croissants, and they're really cheap but such great like carb loading because they're easy to digest and stuff. So if you get something like that beforehand, and you know, carb-based snacks that you can just bring with you. Obviously, if you're limited with like carry-on and stuff, that might be a bit of an issue, but you might still be able to take a few things. But then if you can't, I would say if you have to go look for fuel where you are, don't go to like the little shops if you can, or the sort of coffee shops or cafes or something. Just go to a supermarket and buy like the croissants or like some rice cakes or bagels or something, you know, like more stuff that you can make a bit more yourself maybe. And I think that just generally works out cheaper because anything like a small corner shop, hotel shop, or cafe is just going to charge a lot, and it's probably going to be something that isn't quite enough for you if you're carb loading. You know, you might get this small sandwich or something, but it's probably not in the right ratios you really need when you're trying to kind of up your glycogen stores before a race anyway. Plus, the reason I dropped out in Amsterdam was due to food poisoning, so I would say you don't want to start trying stuff in little shops, and maybe like the airport prawn sandwich that's been like in the fridge for a while isn't the best thing either. So it's safer to bring your own stuff, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. Like, you can save a lot of money if you're prepared with food, but it's also practical, one, from a stress standpoint of trying to find food when you're carb loading and you always want food with you, but two, also from familiarity. You know, it's a little bit easier if you're traveling to, like, Boston or Chicago or New York, but if you're going anywhere where the cuisine's a little bit different, you probably want to leave the experimentation a little bit more for after the race, so it can help to have things on you.
Yeah, I learned my lesson from Amsterdam. I always bring stuff now, and I never eat out until after the race now. Like, lesson learned.
Yeah. The other thing I've started doing for breakfast is I always have, before every race, I will do toast with jam and sometimes peanut butter. And to bring all those stuff is a bit of a pain for even a road trip, let alone flying. But I found any supermarket is going to have some kind of whiter brand bread. And then I will literally go to like whatever hotel I'm staying at and ask them for like jam packets or peanut butter packets. And usually they will have it. And then you don't have to carry anything around and it's free.
Yeah, that sounds very similar to what I do. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, it's a great idea, though. I do get some weird looks when I walk out of the little hotel restaurants holding nothing but like a whole handful of these jam packets.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Let's go to tip number 6, which is to stay close to the finish line to cut down on car rentals or taxi costs. Is this something you have experience with, Haley?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's like pros and cons either way. I'd say for me, like using again London as an example, there are definitely situations where it's better to stay further away if there is a good public transport route in, because you're probably going to pay a lot to stay like near the start of the London Marathon, but you can also equally stay outside of London where there's good like transport links in, because then on race day it's free to use the tube. So that's what I always do for a race like that. However, that might not always be an option, and if you are gonna have to get things like rental cars or an expensive taxi if you aren't staying nearby, then it probably works best to stay nearby. So like I think it's a case of considering the area, the public transport options available, and what is best. So again, it's about doing really good research, maybe asking people who've done the race before, and just finding out what is the best, cheapest option, because I think sometimes the best, cheapest option might be staying near the start. Sometimes it might be staying further away and taking public transport in, which might add a little bit of extra stress, but sometimes that's kind of minimal, like, and actually less stressful than staying near a very busy start. So I think there can be like, yeah, pros and cons to doing both there.
Yeah, and it's so specific on the city. When I was in Amsterdam, I took the public transport there. It was either free or maybe a euro or two, and there were like big groups of people. Like I probably could have gone in not even knowing the route and pretty easily known how to get there. But compare that to Toronto, and I love our marathon here, but the marathon starts at I think like 7 or 7:30 a.m. and our public transport system starts at 6. So if you're not staying close to the start line, you can't start getting on public transportation at 6 if you need time to warm up and check your bag. So it's not really an option for most people. So definitely kind of ask around and figure out about the public transport system, maybe even before you start planning hotels.
Yeah, definitely. It's so area specific, because I know when we did that ultra last year, because it was kind of some small like town in the mountains or whatever, it's like you're not going to be able to get public transport there. The best thing to do is just stay close to the start, and then, or actually the best thing to do was to stay close to the finish, and then they do buses from there that take you to the start. So it's like it's so race specific. And then I guess because it was an ultra, it was over such a wide area anyway, that if you go to the start, you're sort of 100k from the finish. So yeah, it's just really individual on the race. And
Yeah, and I was going to add that I think that links into the next one, which is quite related, but that's to research local transportation and check if the race provides any shuttles. So I think you were just talking about this point, that a lot of races will actually, sometimes to both the start and finish line, provide you with transportation.
yes, they do. I think I think the ultra I'm planning to do at the end of January, they do shuttles from different places to the start, just because they don't want a load of people coming to the start, because it's like, like the sort of area around there is quite what's the word, like quite protected, relating to nature, and like little small towns with lots of history and stuff, so they don't want loads of people coming to the start line, so they've got like buses taking people from different places. So if the race is already doing that, then why not take advantage of that option? It's a great way to get to the start, and also like maybe help the local environment and stuff as well. So
Yeah, so I think a lot of people listening to this in January might have their eyes on doing the Boston Marathon either this year or other years. And if you don't already know, Boston does provide shuttles or buses or whatever the term is that will take you out to Hopkinton where the race starts, since it's not actually in downtown Boston, being a point-to-point. But one lesser-known fact that people don't actually know is that they actually have shuttles already in Hopkinton too. So when I ran the race, I actually stayed in Hopkinton, and instead of taking a bus at like 5:30 a.m. and having to take like an hour trip out, those shuttles run every 10 to 15 minutes, and it's like 5 to 10 minutes to get into the village. So I was able to show up to the bus at like 7 a.m. with like tons of time to spare before the race. So, just because people have done it one way doesn't always mean that's the best. So do your research, whatever race you're going to be running.
yeah, definitely. Like there's often options that people don't really know about. Like if you can find an option like that, that's really great, because anything that can give you a little bit of a less stressful morning before a race is always like really appreciated.
Oh, 100%. And it's a trade-off, because I think for some people that bus ride is kind of a quintessential Boston experience. But for me, I was happy to trade that in for a little less stress and a little more sleep.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, definitely.
And not to mention saving on hotel costs when you're not staying in
Yes.
downtown Boston. Yeah, it's kind of wild to me how much hotel prices get jacked up before these race weekends.
Yeah, they really do. Like it's kind of annoying, but I guess I see why they do it, 'cause it's like demand and everything. But
Yeah,
get your own back by booking them the year in advance.
Yeah, so out of curiosity, for London, like say you book all the way a year in advance, what does it typically cost for a race weekend, like per night?
Let me think. Under the under £100, I'd say we booked it for a year out. So I think it probably goes up. I mean, this is not in the central London. This is kind of a little far out. That we always have this place that we stay, and it's quite easy to get like a tube ride in. It's not too long or anything. I would say, yeah, like maybe £80 possibly per night, but we just stay like the one night beforehand and then go home. So
Like that's mind-boggling to me, because it sounds so dirt cheap compared to a lot of races, and for those who have run majors, it probably sounds cheap to you as well, because I'm running Chicago in the fall, and if you find anything close to 500 remotely close to the city center, like that's an absolute steal, let alone close to 100 pounds is probably something like 150 US.
yeah, like I can imagine they are. I mean, we've done well to find some good deals, but it is a budget hotel as well. It's very basic, but if you come to the UK for a race, something like a Travel Lodge or a Premier Inn tends to be, look out for one of those, just as a little tip, because you tend to be able to book them a long time in advance, cancel up to 24 hours before. They're really basic, but you have like everything you need, like a kettle, and it's usually pretty standard stuff, so though you're not going to get anything special, you also probably don't get anything terrible.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I tend to do. Everywhere I go to race in the UK, I'm like, where's the nearest Travel Lodge?
Yeah, when I'm racing, I'm going for convenience over a nice place. And when I went to
Mhm.
Amsterdam, I even booked two separate hotels. So I booked one that was closer to the finish line for before the race, and then I moved to one that was more affordable and outside the city center for afterwards.
Oh, that's a good plan.
Yeah, it was a good plan at first, I thought, until I was like so ruined from the race I couldn't
Haha.
walk, and trying to move my bags was a mess.
Yeah, I always think about that if I come to a hotel and I'm staying there before and after and I see there's like loads of stairs up to the room. I'm like, oh no, oh no.
Yeah, yeah, it's a struggle. All right, let's go to number 8, which is speak to locals for recommendations. Maybe a little bit less applicable if this is super close to your hometown, but if it's further out, I think this can really save you a lot of money. Haley, have you had experience kind of chatting with people from different cities you're traveling to?
Yeah, I mean, I guess for me, and maybe this means I should kind of get out more and get away from the computer. But generally, I find that I sort of post things on Facebook groups where there's a lot of runners to get recommendations, or like just Google it and yeah, like use kind of social media to find recommendations. Because you're kind of casting a wider net there, and you're probably going to get more recommendations. Um, I guess that's more applicable if you live in quite a small place where there aren't that many runners. So, um, yeah, definitely get recommendations. Use Facebook groups and things like that to get those recommendations. We have a good Facebook group of Runners Connect. I'm sure if someone posted on there like, "I'm doing this race, what do you recommend?" then they get some good, nice replies on there from like-minded runners too. So, I think that can be really helpful.
Yeah, 100%. I think locals are likely to know these stuff about the race if they've run it and what kind of transportation there is, but can probably point you in the right direction of what types of hotels to look at, where to find the food you're looking for. It just makes the whole experience so much easier. And maybe if not a local, even just somebody who's done the race before might have a little insider knowledge.
Yeah, it's definitely worth finding people who've done the race before. Because then you can get some tips about the race course as well and the organization and things like that, which I think is really important.
Yeah, one thing a local run club I run with called Black Toe in the city, they do before. Uh, I know they do it before Boston. I think they do it for some of the other majors as well. But they'll have like a dinner together like a week out, where they kind of chat through all the logistics. So, race strategy for the race, but then they'll talk through like what to expect from the expo and getting around the city and stuff like that. And it definitely takes a lot of the stress out when you just feel like you know what to expect.
Yeah, that sounds really helpful. That's why I like doing the same races over and over again. Although it's really boring, it's because once you've done it once, it massively takes the stress out of things. But that sounds like you get all the benefits without just having to repeat the same race. So that sounds really good.
Haley, I hope you know that you're going to be my point of contact if I'm running the London race now.
Yeah, very happy to help. I'll tell you exactly where I stayed in this hotel. And then you can get the budget hotel deal as well. Although don't blame me for the basicness of the room.
That's fine. Basic is just fine. Definitely London's on the bucket list.
Cool.
Cool.
Yeah, it's a great race.
Okay, we're on number 9 now. And this one's actually for after the race, but it's to explore the city on foot. Maybe harder in some cities than others. Not every city is equally walkable, but I found you can have some pretty good experiences just walking around if you know what the sights are.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, depends on how beat up your legs are, I guess, but hopefully not too bad and you can enjoy walking around. But yeah, especially with a city like London, there's so much you can see if you're on foot and you can have a great experience without ever actually having to pay to go in anywhere. There's so many great things to see and it's a good atmosphere and there's some lovely parks to walk in and things. So I think, to be honest, I don't think that you need to pay a lot of money to get a great experience after a race. I mean, that depends on your preference and what you enjoy doing, but I think just kind of walking around the city and looking at some of, the famous landmarks and stuff is a really great way to enjoy it. I don't personally find that I think I would gain much by paying loads of expensive entry fees and things. And definitely walking around is a more relaxing way to experience it. And I know I said that it might not be so fun if your legs ache, but to be honest, now that I think about it, possibly the tube is worse because you have to go up and down the steps. And it's quite busy, so you can't just like stroll along at your own pace. So maybe it's nicer to walk around and not be rushed and not have to go up and down stairs.
I think also just to flush out the legs too. Like the last thing I want to think about for the few days after a race is running or even biking or cross training. But I find if I'm walking around a city, it just keeps me from feeling like tight or lethargic when I'm not doing kind of more structured workouts.
Yeah, I think it definitely helps recovery. I sort of keep moving over just sort of sitting down any day. I think my worst ever recovery experiences have been when I've travelled home quite soon after a race and been sitting down in the car for a long time, and then I've just felt terrible. So I think that keeping walking around the city is actually a really great recovery tool as well. So
Yeah, and you talked about pricey entry fees, definitely with tours and stuff, but even just with like taxis or Ubers, taking one to the race start is probably not going to be a huge portion of your expenses for a race weekend. But if you're needing to take those everywhere you go, like that can really add up over the course of a weekend or even longer, depending how long your trip is.
yeah, definitely. I mean, I used to live in London, so I fully appreciate like how expensive it can be. And like, food and drinks just seem to be ridiculously expensive there. I mean, sure, treat yourself after the marathon, you've got to, but like I say do a mix, like, have some things that you buy from a supermarket and kind of prepare yourself and then treat yourself to some things. But I always think it's worth like making sure if you treat yourself, it's like something you really, really want. Like don't just end up being forced into buying some like rubbish thing just because, it's the only thing available. Have those basic things yourself, and then when you do splash out on something, make sure that it's something that you're really, really excited about.
Yeah, and this is part of the reason why I like having checklists and stuff, because it helps for me personally to just reflect on what are the things I actually want to bring back that are going to make me smile later, that are going to make my experience, and those are the things I want to invest in.
Yeah, I think that's so important. Like, that's why I think personally, I'm quite tight and I don't like spending money and I like to budget. But then if there's something that I am going to spend money on, it has to be something that I really want. Does that make sense? Like, I don't mind spending money if it's on something that is really important to me and is really going to add to experience. But I can't stand it when I end up paying for something that I didn't really want anyway, just because I needed some food or I needed a drink or I needed something else. Like I don't mind spending money if it's something that really adds to an experience and like a food I'm really craving or like something I've always wanted to do. But if it's just just because I have to, it's kind of like it's a bit frustrating.
Definitely. No, there's always those traditions and stuff that you almost feel like you just have to do this. I think like when I was in Prague, everyone would have kind of those like, oh, they're almost like these twisted fried dough cones that they put like ice cream and toppings on. They're pretty traditional there, but if you go to a touristy area, they'll charge like 8 to 10 euros for those, when you could probably go to like a very good gelato shop and get something delicious for half the cost.
Yeah, that is so true. Like, when I was in France for like, it wasn't for a race actually, it was just for like a training camp, but everyone was going on about these amazing almond croissants at this bakery. And like, I kind of realized that you could get the same croissants that were almost exactly the same at the supermarket for like a fraction of the price, and then I could have like 5 of them or something. So like it seemed a bit silly that everyone was going to this bakery just to get this croissant when it wasn't really very different in my opinion to the supermarket ones, because
Yeah, that was one of my favorite parts about France, is like when I'm in a North American city, I feel like you want a really good baked good, like maybe there's a few specialty shops that will have something delicious. If you're in France, you can go to pretty much any bakery and it's going to be as good, if not better, than those shops here.
Yeah, their bakeries are amazing. Like I just went to I think we just went to like an Aldi bakery or something, and they had so much choice, and it's so much cheaper than going to like one of the the little bakeries that everyone goes on about.
Yeah, and it's wild to me how affordable and good the cheese is. Like supermarket cheese, that's as good as like something you would get on an expensive charcuterie board here. You could spend just a few euros at the supermarket.
Yeah, actually, to be honest, in Britain, I think we're kind of okay with cheese. But I think when I have been to the US, perhaps I was a bit like disappointed about the cheese. No offense to any US people if you're like, feel kind of protective about your cheese, but like, I feel like France and Europe is like more better for that kind of thing, anyways.
Yeah, maybe I'm speaking to the wrong audience here because in
Yeah,
Canada and most of the U.S. we're not spoiled for that. But maybe we have some listeners over in
yeah, when you
Wisconsin who
come
have
to
no idea what we're
London.
talking about with the poor cheese.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think again we've definitely touched on the last saving tip here, but I'll go to it anyways because I think it's so important, which is make a budget, and probably as an extension to that, stick to it.
Yeah, yeah. I think like then going back to only paying for things that you want to pay for, you can be more intentional about that. You can like work out what you're really going to invest in, what's really going to make the experience for you, and then what you really want to be careful about and not spend too much money on. And just having that in mind beforehand is going to be really helpful in making sure that it's the best experience it can be for you. I think. And otherwise as well, I think it's just very easy to spend more than you wanted to spend. Just to have it down, it's going to be really helpful, I think, just to keep you focused.
Yeah, we are definitely not financial experts here, but I am definitely somebody who has also gone on a decent number of trips for races, and they can get really pricey if you don't have a budget. And I think there's such cool experiences and ones that you can actually, go on for a lot less money if you're willing to prepare in advance.
Yeah, I feel like I need to get my sister on as a financial expert because she's an accountant. She was telling me the other day she has like a budget she does for just like every month generally. I'm like, that is way too organized for me. I do not have a budget. I mean, I try to save money, but I don't like have a budget for the house, every month. But maybe some people do, I think. I'm just not organized enough for that.
Yeah, I'd be a little worried. There's some things I want to budget for, like I kind of know grocery expenses, but I don't know that I want to have a specific budget for like running shoes because I might be afraid to know how many I'm going through.
Yes, I would be afraid. I would be afraid to know that, and I'd be afraid to know sports nutrition. Like, yeah, even with all my good intentions of saving money, I feel like my costs on those two things are still probably embarrassingly high.
Yeah, and really they're essential. Like you don't want to be starving yourself on runs. So if it's a hobby, it's kind of just the price you
They
have
are
to pay
so
to a certain extent.
essential. Like, especially with the nutritional runs, I always think to myself, like it's so important. It's your health because if you get it wrong and you end up in a calorie deficit and you get a stress fracture, well, then you might be paying £500 for an MRI. So at the end of the day, it is worth it because you're going to save on physio costs and MRI costs. So, like it's really worth it for me. I always try to tell myself that. And the same with shoes, I guess. If you're wearing worn out shoes or shoes that aren't right for you and you get a stress fracture, you're going to be paying more on doctors and physios and things potentially. So it's going to pay off. Those two things, I think if you can, I mean, not everyone can, but like if you can, you should spend your money on those things rather than the expensive gear, which, to be honest, that is not that helpful in some cases. Of course, for some things like cold weather, it might be, but in terms of just general running, if you're lucky to live in a kind of favourable climate, my favourite running trousers at the minute cost like $6.99, and they are so much better than like my more expensive ones, to be honest. Like, I don't think the cost necessarily lines up with how good a product is in a lot of cases. So shoes and nutrition, like, pay for it, I would say, if you can, just because they can prevent you like getting injured, which is going to possibly lead to more costs, and just they're very important for like long-term health. But in terms of like gear, you can pay a lot less than you think, I would say.
Yeah, and on the nutrition piece, just to not contradict ourselves, I still think it's great ideas if you want to make your own, but definitely have some form of nutrition, I think is what we're saying. You don't want to skip it entirely.
You can still get all that fuel making your own or going for cheaper options. Like, some people find they can eat like jelly babies on a run or something, or like, things that don't actually cost as much as traditional sports products. So if you're one of those people, you don't have to pay a particular amount to get that fuel. As long as you're getting that fuel, that's the main thing.
Yeah, my go-to is pretzels, which is like super affordable as a fuel before run. I did try recently, like, I don't know if you have Sour Patch Kids where you are, but they're kind of like almost like gummy bears, but with this like, kind of sour citric thing on them, and it definitely did not sit well. So I might have to make sure that I stick to something that's purely
Yeah.
sweet.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, just to wrap up, we've kind of, I think, talked about our main tips when it comes to traveling for races. But any other tips just for budgeting or saving money as a runner in general that you want to touch on?
Yeah. So I have a few, I guess. Like, I know some people who kind of pay for gym memberships and don't potentially use it that much. I think, you know, in terms of you might have to make like a short term investment for this. But if you find that you're more likely to do some strength if you instead invest in like some secondhand weights or something, that or some secondhand kettlebells. I've personally found that to be more affordable and something I would actually do. Like, rather than paying like, I don't know, 300 quid for a gym membership, I sort of bought like a set of secondhand weights for like 50 quid or something and like use those instead. And to be honest, I probably wouldn't go if I had to. I probably wouldn't do strength twice a week if I had to actually get in the car and go to the gym. So having like a little gym in my house is actually a really better option for me. But it really does depend, you know, what facilities you have, like if you have the room for doing that kind of thing and how you're set up. But it's worth thinking about if that is something you could do, because you might think, oh, it's more money initially, but it soon kind of saves on the cost of the gym membership over like the course of a year. Or like, I mean, the sort of 5 years I've been using just weights at home that I just got secondhand, they've more than paid for themselves. And probably in terms of injury prevention and not going to the physio so much as well. So it's definitely worth thinking whether you could have other options. And then if you're using,
And the time savings to go to the
yes,
gym.
yeah, exactly, yeah, definitely. Time that you could be like spending with your family, or just getting those strength sessions in that you wouldn't normally have time for. And same with if you need to do like cross training, or you want to do cross training to kind of supplement your mileage. Like, again, this one might take a little bit longer to pay for itself, but I have like a road bike and that I already had, and then I bought like a turbo trainer, which is in a lot of cases it may not be too expensive if you get like a refurbished or a second-hand one. And then there's like free alternatives to Zwift, like there's one called like My Whoosh, which is like a free Zwift, and then you can have like a cross training setup in your home as well, which may not pay for itself as immediately, but still, if you're talking over like 5 years, can again make you do it, and also in the end is cheaper than going to the gym. So just depends on like how, like whether you're able to make that upfront investment, I guess, because initially it's more expensive than paying for 1 month at the gym, but then you look at like, you know, 3 years of going to the gym and it's a lot cheaper, and then the money it might save you on physio and massage and things. So
Yeah, and those are things that are easy to overlook. I don't think I appreciated how much physio costs when you do have an injury can add up when I first started running.
yes, yeah. I learned my lesson about physio recently though, because I've been going to a physio in London, just because I kind of, you know, knew from when I lived somewhere else and knew the person and was a big fan of them and whatever. But like, I realized if you're going to pay like city prices, it's like 3 times as much. And I actually managed to find someone more locally who was like, you know, like a third of the price and was also really good. So I realized that maybe, you know, physios might be different costs, but it's more about the quality of the person and how good they are as a physio, and how, which you can probably get a good idea of with just a few kind of interactions with them, than, you know, again, the more expensive physio isn't necessarily the better physio either.
100%, yeah. And I think same thing to running shoes. The more expensive one is not always going to be the better one. But one tip I did want to add too, and this is more specific to gear, but it's checking warranties, because a lot of them have really generous warranty policies. I think I wrote down a few here, but like Hoka will refund any defect up to 1 year after purchase. Adidas will go all the way up to 2 years. And I've had 1 or 2 times when I've had like, you know, just like a tear at the top of a shoe or a little bit of the mesh ripping in my split shorts. And most of the time the brands actually will like send you a completely new product if you do that. So definitely be aware and take advantage.
Yeah, I've definitely done that before.
Yeah, 100%. Any last tips before we finish off?
Yeah, I guess just on the super shoes, like one thing I found helpful to know is that if you are someone who uses super shoes but in training as well, because like it's not something that's affordable to everyone to use them in training, but if you can like add to those performance benefits and also like recover better from workouts and things. So there are benefits to training super shoes. But what's important to know is that although general knowledge kind of says that super shoes should only be worn for this many miles, which is seems to be less miles than a normal trainer. Actually, that's more related to like that extra one, extra tiny bit of performance. So really, if you're using a super shoe for training, you can use it just as long as a normal trainer, really, and we've still got all those recovery benefits and most of the performance benefits. So if you retire a super shoe from racing, just keep using it for training for like a lot longer, because the guidelines about how long they give those tip-top performance benefits are not really related to how long it's still going to give you recovery benefits and help you a little bit in training, so you don't feel you need to then throw them away. Like, you can use a super shoe a lot longer. And if you're not going for like 110% super performance in a race, then just use your slightly more worn out pair and you're going to get most of the benefits anyway. Don't feel that they need to be like 200 miles in the bin, because that's not the case. Like, you can use them a lot longer, and then it's generally kind of talked about, really.
Yeah, and I find timing wise it works out really great sometimes, where you can use it for one training block, marathon, half marathon, whatever it is, and then after you get in a couple races, it just becomes your training shoe until the next race, when you then open a fresh new pair, or when you've used a couple times for the next race.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, cool. I think that's all the tips on my end. Anything else you wanted to mention?
I think that's it, really. Yeah, I guess. No, I think that's everything I had. I think we've given some great tips there, and hopefully it'll help.
Yeah, definitely. And I think a lot of the stuff we listed on this show will be applicable in a lot of scenarios if you're traveling for races, but I think just for travel in general and also just for running in general. So to everyone listening, I hope whether you're planning to go race a marathon outside your hometown, or whether you just love the sport or love to travel, that there's going to be something here for you. Cool. All right. I think that's a perfect place to wrap up. So Haley, thanks for joining me and giving out some great tips.
Yeah, no problem. I really enjoyed it. I hope it helped.